Hey everyone, Lori Meyer here with the Stamp Club. And for those of you who are not able to join us tonight, we missed you and hope that you will enjoy seeing these projects. I just mentioned to everybody who is here that I'm not going to make these cards entirely. You know how to do that. My intention is to show you a little bit of some maybe tricks and tips, some things you might not know, maybe some things you do know, just so you hear them again. And I'm going to show you two different ways to use scraps in your cards. We're going to start with this one. So I'm just going to take the second one away. I have piles of supplies that are off camera, and we're going to get going on this particular card. And you'll see that it has designer series paper as the focal point. But let's just talk about what you would need to create or recreate that card. Card base, standard size A2, 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4.25 on the 8.5-inch side. I'm going to kind of put this to the side, but if you do want to make the full card, you will need that. I have a frame behind the focal point of my card, and this is cut to 4 1/8. So it's just a little bit smaller than an A2, and 5 3/8. Standard of what I do. So 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. But the piece that I'm really going to focus on is changing this piece of white into the way that I design the front of the card. This piece is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So again, 4 inches by 5 1/4. And what I'm going to do is use designer series paper when I recreate this card. You can use cardstock. Cardstock will add a little bit more thickness to your card. I like to cheat kind of and use designer series paper. It's going to add a lot of color without me having to do an awful lot. And you're going to see when I bring out the pieces that I'm using, I intentionally chose a designer series paper that has truly a picture. And you can see the picture going through all three pieces on each of the sets that I'm choosing. So you can see that flower, you can see the tear in the paper. The paper that I'm using comes from the Masterfully Made designer series paper. It is one that is retiring from the current annual catalog, and it is gorgeous. Now, I cut my pieces so that they are 1/2 inch wide, and I'm starting with 12 inches. I had a scrap piece that was 3 inches wide by 12, and it was perfect. And you're going to see if I flip over this strip that it's the same piece of paper, but I'm going to use both sides. Just make sure that if you do have two designs that you're putting together, that they're going to look good together, because they're going to overlap in parts. And I wanted to make sure that, I think that is maybe Granny Apple Green or Lemon Lime Twist, one or the other, that you can see the color in both of the sides of the paper. I'll be able to get 2 cards out of these 6 strips, but I'm going to just show you how to do one. And I'm going to take 3 of these strips away. I'm going to try to keep them in order because I will be bringing them back. And we're going to start by placing the 3 strips that I have here. And what I'm going to do is get this in the camera so you can see. You don't have to be particular at all about how you line up the angle where you're actually putting your strips. What you do need to do is pay attention to 2 things. One is that wherever you put your strips, that you have enough hanging off the side, if you want to call it that, so that you can trim off your paper. And we're going to trim that off from the back. The other one is that as you add these pieces, if you're using designer series paper, you want to make sure that when you put everything down, that it all goes together. And I am going to triple check that I have these in the right orientation. And you can see that I don't. So I am going to move these around. And now I do have them in the right order because I can see that design going continuously. So what I'm going to do, it doesn't matter what order you put these down. I'm going to put mine kind of like this. We'll just wing it here. And I'm doing two things. Like I said, I'm making sure that these pieces are hanging over the side, and I'm also aligning the design. And I'm going to have a chance to get this a little bit more perfect in just a minute. And then I'm going to take a piece of Post-it note, and I'm going to tack these down. So I'm just going to hold these down and tack them down so they're not going to move. And then I'm going to adhere just on the sides, these three pieces. And when I do that, I'm going to put my adhesive on the white paper, not on the designer series paper. And the reason for that is if I get any of my adhesive on the designer series paper, there's a chance that I'm going to glue the strip to this piece of blue paper, and I don't want to do that. So what I tend to do is I'm just going to lift up one of the strips, and right on the edge, I can visually see that that's going to be right in line. I'm going to go ahead and put down only at the edge of my paper. And I'm doing it only at the edge of the paper because I'm going to come back in and I'm going to weave in the other three pieces. So I don't want to put any glue really far up, or I'm not going to be able to tuck down that second set of three strips. All right, so I have this one adhered. Now I'm going to go in on the second one. And again, I'm just putting a little bit of glue. I'm going to go ahead and put that down, and I can start lifting the Post-it note up. I want to keep that third one down just for a minute. And now what I can do is kind of move the second piece so that I have my design really nicely aligned. I'm really looking at these two darker areas, and I'm trying to get that parallel. And then I'm just going to tack that down. And then on the third, we're doing the same thing. So putting a little bit of glue down here at the corner. I'm going to go ahead and drop that down, take off my Post-it note, and I've still got a little bit of grease to get that moving. And I'm doing two things. I'm lining up the design, and I'm trying to get the spacing between these two and these two to be the same. Close enough. No one is ever going to know if it's not perfect. And I should be able to lift this up without any issue. It should not be adhering to the blue paper. All right, we have our first three set of paper down. Now I'm going to grab my other three pieces, and the first thing I'm going to do is line them up so I know that they are in the right order. And I'm looking particularly at this rose as an example, making sure that I have that design going the right way. And I can triple check down here on the bottom and see that I have the pieces in the right order. Sometimes it's a little easier to see that design if you just kind of push them back together. I'm going to take off the third piece. If I number them 1, 2, 3, I'm going to take off the second piece. And this third piece, I'm going to start with the weaving. And the way I do it, it's not scientific at all. I'm going to go under one, over one, and under one, just like a normal weave that you would do. And because I have the 3 initial pieces down, I can move this around a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with these first 3. I'm going to make sure that my paper is hanging off the side. I'm going to try and scoot it down, but I don't want to scoot it down too much because I want that design to still have a little bit of white down here at the bottom. I'm just going to bring that over. Then I'm going to grab my second piece and triple check to make sure that that is the second, and do the opposite weave. So over, under, over. And then just pull that back. And again, make sure that it's hanging over the side and that the design is lining up. And I'm going to try, doesn't really matter, I'm going to try to get the same spacing with both sets of strips, meaning the same spacing between the strips. And then I'll get my third piece and do the opposite, under, over, under, and then line that one up as well. So just like the other 2, I'm making sure that it is hanging off the edge. I'm going to pull that down, get the pattern kind of lined up and pretty straight. And you'll feel when you're doing this, I'm sure you've done weaving before, you're going to feel that this area is a little tight, and it should be, because you've got multiple layers of paper. Even though it's designer series paper, it is going to start feeling a little tight, and it's also because it's going over and under. And then when you like where it is, get your piece of Post-it note again and just put that down. And you can do either side, meaning you can put the Post-it note over here, you can put the Post-it note over on the other side. Because my strips are long, I'm going to put the Post-it note on the long side, and it's just going to be easier for me to actually glue down the shorter sides. I'm going to just turn this around a little bit to make it easier for me to do. Now, my suggestion is that when you start gluing down the second set, that you start with the one that is the most toward the other 3 that you've already glued down. In other words, I've put glue here on the first 3. I'm going to start with this one because it's the one that it's not going to be able to move too much once I get it down. I'm going to lift that up. I'm going to put a little bit of glue right on the end. And I'm going to go ahead and tack that down. And just like we did on the other one, you can move the Post-it note if you want. You can take the Post-it note off completely if you want. I'm sort of pulling on the end that you can't really see on camera and adjusting this a little bit just to get that design lined up. I'm also making sure that these strips are as parallel as they can be, looking at the gap here, looking at the gap here. And I'm going to put a dot right at the corner and tack that down. And then for all intent and purpose, I'm going to put this to the side, but we might use that in a minute, or we may not, depending upon how everything is lining up. I'm pushing that strip back a little bit toward me, lining the design up, trying to get it parallel again. If it's not, don't worry. Putting one more dot here and tacking that down. What's really nice about this kind of design is that these pieces of paper are going to hold together, so you really don't need an awful lot of adhesive. So where we are right now is these 3 ends are tacked down, these 3 ends are tacked down, and what we need to do is the other side. Pretty logical. And you can do this in any order that you want. I'm just going to go from right to left, and again, put a little bit of glue. This will adhere. You're not going to need to worry about it. You know where we're going. right in the middle, another little piece or little bit of glue. And again, you still have some grace if you want to finagle these a little bit before you really commit them to sticking to the paper. And put that one down as well. So we've done our two that are the Granny Apple Green, Lemon Lime Twist, whatever color it really is. I could actually look at the package of paper and confirm the color. And then I'm going to go to the last side. I love this because it uses scraps. If you have scraps of designer series paper that might be too small for the card base or another project that you have, you can definitely make some scrappy cards with some of the pieces that you have. And like I mentioned, you don't need a piece that is 12 inches. You can easily use 6 inches and get a card like this. We've got one more to do. Pretty basic in terms of how this goes together. And also just like many designs, the possibilities in terms of the occasions that you can make these for are infinite. All right, I should be able to lift this up without a problem. And I should see that all my pieces are attached, and they are. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to flip this to the back. And now I can see exactly where I need to cut off the excess. Make sure you have a really nice set of scissors or pair of scissors when you're doing this. And go right over to the edge and cut along. You're going to get some pieces that are small, that are probably trash. I'm not going to save anything that small. These pieces, however, the ones that I'm cutting now, are definitely long enough for me to make another card like this. And let me show you, because if I just flip this over, you're going to see that I have plenty of room to get that across. And you're going to have different sizes because of the way that they were angled. But you will be able to get a couple of cards out of strips that start at 12 inches long. Sometimes the corners can be a little fun depending upon how you put your pieces on. I'll show you the one that I had as an example because I actually glued it so that the piece was going right around the corner and I just had to cut it. It's kind of cool, a little bit different. But I'm just going to continue to cut these off and save them because I definitely will be able to use them. And then this last set that is hanging off the side, just cut that off. This one did have a little bit going around the corner. So if you can see that, it's very small, but you are going to want to get that little piece because you will see that if you don't. So just make sure your edges are clean. And then you have a beautiful card front. Now, if you're concerned that those pieces are not going to stay down, what you can do is a couple of things. You could put some glue dots underneath if you wanted to, just take one off. Or you can also put something on the top and add some embellishments and kind of put them on the sides of the strips. But this should be fine. But again, if you have any concerns, you can definitely tack it down a little bit. So what I did, and I'm not going to do this, I'm just going to walk you through a dry fit of what I did. I put the black frame around the back, and then I put the two pieces, the combined black frame and the strips on the top of the card. Now I did add a little bit of bling. You can see that little strip of silver. I knew I was going to use the rhinestones on the top. So I added just a teeny teeny bit. And this is a piece of silver cardstock. It is cut to 1/8 of an inch. And all I did was I tacked that down in the middle of that strip. You can see how I did that. I wanted to just give it a little bit more and pull in the silver. So that is the basic process, the basic steps to put this kind of card together. I can also say that if you wanted to put more glue behind these strips as you're gluing them down, the second set, not the first set, but the second time that you're putting them down, you can definitely put a little bit more glue behind that and get them tacked down as well. All right, so that's card number 1 for right now. Let's talk about card number 2, another one that you can do with scraps. This is, I think, really fun, and some of the cards that the Card Club ladies shared earlier tonight before we started this video are similar to this design in many respects. This is nothing new. It's just very fun to do. And if you want to do something like this, let me show you the pieces that you will need. Definitely a card base, same as the one for the other card, a regular A2 card base. I picked a blue that I knew would be a perfect frame for the colors that I'm going to use. This is Azure Afternoon. It is one of the colors in the Masterfully Made Designer Series paper. And I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to tell you that the die cut that I made, the Azure Afternoon, this piece that's behind the sentiment, I die cut out of the middle of the piece that is on this card. So the blue piece in the background has a major hole in it. No one's ever going to know, but it's a great way to save paper. But I just wanted to spend a couple minutes and show you basics on how to put this kind of card together. And I think you can see in the camera that after I did it, I put it through an embossing folder to give it a little bit of texture so that it looked kind of fun. And that frame is the same size as the frame on the other card. This is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. But the star of the show, again, is a piece of white cardstock, 4 inches by 5 1/4. And then I had a bunch of scraps from the Masterfully Made paper, and I just cut them up. If I wanted to, I could bring in the pieces that I just used when I made that other card, and I could add them to what I'm doing right now. I'm going to kind of stick with the ones that I have. I've cut these into various widths. Some are 1/2 inch, some are 3/4 of an inch, some are, I think a couple are about 1/4 of an inch. It really depends on what you want to do. And you should be able to use multiple sides of the paper if you're kind of careful in what you choose, or mix it up. Just grab something that is in your stash and mix it up. Here's my few tips on this, because this is a very, very simple pattern. The first strip that you put down is going to start where your pattern is going to be created from. Couple of things. One is make sure you always have something hanging off the side. And when you lay it down, again, I recommend that you put the glue on the white paper rather than on the Designer Series paper. And the way you can make sure that you have the glue where you need it on this first piece is I kind of push this off to the side just a little bit. And now I know that I have a place where I can put my glue. So I'm just going to get a really thin line that goes kind of like that. It does not matter what angle you put this at. Trust me. I'm going to bring that in so it's pretty close to the edge. And I am just going to put that down. Not overthinking it at all. Now, I can do a couple of things. I can work this as I'm going, especially if I don't have a lot of paper and I want the paper to go as far as it can. If you'll notice, I started with a piece 12 by 12. I know I'm going to cut that off. So I can go ahead if I want to and just turn this over while I'm working and cut it off. Now I have another piece that I can use if I want to put right up against that particular piece. I just need to make sure of a couple things. I need to make sure that that piece is going to hang off both sides. It does. Brilliant. So I can add some glue and put that down. Now, you don't have to cut paper off while you're doing this. I'm just saying it is an option if you want to do it. You do want to make sure that you get these nice and tight, or that you space them out so that they look like they have the same gap, the same measured gap between them. I usually start with two that are kind of going the same way and then play. Whenever you butt something up against a piece that you've already put down, just make sure that it's cut straight. And I'll show you what I mean by doing that. So I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing. I'm going to sort of move that a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of glue. I'm going to come back and I am going to just put that straight on the top. Now let's say that I want to use that same pattern, maybe on the other side. Well, if this is the only piece that I have, what I can do right now is turn this over, cut it off, and then on the other side, I could go ahead and add this piece. I can either add it from the end that's cut straight, or I could put this into my paper trimmer and just make sure that I cut off that pointed end. I'll just do that with that little piece of Post-it in there. And I can go ahead and add that piece in on that side. So just always make sure that you have a flat end, because you're going to be butting these up against each other. And you can use the same piece, or now I'm just going to start adding pieces kind of randomly. And it's a really, really fun way to make what kind of looks like a quilt. And an obvious statement, the smaller, the narrower the strips, the more you're going to be putting onto your piece. If I use wider strips like this one, I am not going to be using as many, and it won't take as much time to put the design together. You can liven things up by adding metallics, or if you have cardstock, you can definitely put cardstock in here. Just be aware that if you do put cardstock in, that the thickness is going to be a little bit different because the cardstock is going to be thicker, but you will get some really cool patterns. You could also do completely cardstock, run it through an embossing folder, and then cut the strips and have some really fun patterns that will show on your design. And then if you want to switch it up where you have shorter pieces that are going in the same direction as your first two, you can change that up as well. So this is just, it's going to be whatever you want it to be. And that's half the fun of this, is just putting it together. So you get the idea. And we'll go ahead and add, I like to add pieces that have a little bit of fun design on them, because they definitely add some character. And I also definitely like to put the glue on the piece that I'm adhering to. Now, we're at this fun little corner here. And a couple things you can do, you can find a piece. I'm going to probably use this one. And when you put on a piece that's covering up, make sure that when you lay it down, you can't see any of, in this case, the white. A little bit of glue. I'm going to find the side that has a little bit more fun pattern to it and put it down. So you get the idea. We're almost done with this. And I am going to just grab a little bit more paper for myself. It does get a little unwielding if you have very, very long strips. So occasionally, even if you're not planning on using the strips that you've already used, you might want to trim them off from the back if they are large like these are. And that way you can work a little bit easier. Just like we did on that first card, you're just going to trim it at the edge of your, in my case, white piece. And then flip it over and continue. And it's probable on a card like this that you are going to get something in the corner, just because you're not going to know exactly how the pieces of paper are going to work, where they are going to line up, and you're going to have to trim off these funky little edges. And then I'm going to try and get this put together quickly. I like that. I like this part that has this really fun little pattern in it. So we'll put that right here. I'm trying to grab some of the wider pieces so that I can get this done fairly quickly. And I could even come in here and, yeah, I think I like it going that way better. So we'll do it that way. I'm going to end up with a small piece down at the bottom of this area. And the example that I showed, what I did when I was done with my piece is I went ahead and I put it into an embossing folder. And I can get away with that because it's not going to show the white right there. So I'm just going to tack that little guy down. What the embossing folder will do is two things. It obviously will give you a really nice pattern on this design. It also will make it kind of look like it's quilted. The second thing it does is it reinforces the glue. It will help the glue stick where you have put it. And it will just make things a little bit easier to maneuver. So again, I'm looking for the big pieces. And this is always a surprise. You never know what you're going to get until you're done. And this is just so bright. It's so fun. Let's see. I need a little blue. And do I want it that way? I think I want it that way. And as you're going, at least what I try to do is kind of mix up the colors, not put the same one exactly side by side, make it a little fun. I've got some really fun colors here. And I'm going to put that right in the corner. And then we're just about done. And we're getting a little unwielding again, but I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. So color-wise, yeah, we'll do the blue, and then we're going to have a really dinky little piece. I may not want to do that. I may want a little bit of a smaller blue, because that small of a piece that I would have had left could have been a little challenging to get glued on. So be mindful of that too when you're doing this. If you have a little piece, little area left, you want to make sure you have enough to maneuver. And I think this little piece is going to be perfect. So we'll stick that down. And this piece that I'm holding, I just nabbed from the first card that I made. Just gonna put that down and make sure it's nice and parallel. So now we've got this octopus-like thing, but all the pieces are sticking where I want them to. Just making sure that that last piece is convinced that it's not going anywhere. And then we'll turn it over. And you're going to have plenty of pieces left to do more cards. And play around with the width, the designs that you bring together, meaning the designs from different pieces of designer series paper, different colors. You're going to find that there are just awesome, awesome combinations. Now I have a little bit of a designer series paper strip mess, kind of, sort of, but I'm going to look at this as an opportunity to use these strips, which are ones that are left over from what I was just working on. I really didn't use a lot because I only used pieces of different ones. So I've got plenty to go back and make another card, at least. Actually, probably many more. And the way that I finish off the card that I have as the example, let me just pull that back in. Before adhering this piece down, put it into an embossing folder, run it through the embossing folder. And like I said, you're going to get a design, and the pressure of that embossing folder is also going to reinforce the glue. It's going to help this all stick together, especially some of these little small pieces that you might have around the edges. And then you can finish this card off however you would like. This becomes another layer of paper. And as you can see, two completely different designs with the same designer series paper, different widths. These were all 1/2 inch that I used on the first one. These are definitely different. And what's nice is everything that you create is going to be just a unique card. So maybe you will look at your scraps a little differently and think of them as an opportunity to make some really beautiful cards. I hope you do. And I hope you share them after you have made them. Thanks so much for watching, and enjoy making some scrappy cards.